Hello and welcome to my February 2021 Bullet Journal Plan With Me video. This month I decided to go with a New York theme because I wanted to do something a little bit different than the usual Valentine's themes that are all over the internet with the hearts and the roses. And don't get me wrong, I really love all those setups, but I kind of wanted to do something a little bit more personal. And so I came across the idea of New York because 1 year ago in February of 2020, a few of my friends and I took a short trip to New York, and that was right before the whole pandemic hit and COVID forced us all into our homes, and so it was definitely a highlight of my 2020, so I thought, why not commemorate it? I also recently finished watching Friends, and yes, I know I'm very late to that game, but nevertheless, I did finish the entire series. It's probably one of my favorite shows as of recent, definitely in my top 10 shows ever, I would say, and it does take place in New York, which is why I wanted to include some Friends-themed layouts in this spread, as you will see a little later. So here is my February cover page. I decided to illustrate one of Brooklyn's most Insta-worthy spots on the waterfront in Dumbo, where you can see the Manhattan Bridge in the back, kind of peeping through this New York street with the reddish-brown buildings on the side and the cobblestone streets. One thing that I love about traveling is being able to see the landscapes and buildings that I studied in college as an architecture major. And I remember taking architecture history and having to memorize hundreds of buildings and the year that they were built and the architect who designed them. There were so many buildings that it was really hard to kind of tell them apart. And so one of the strategies we were taught was to draw the buildings, because when you're drawing, you hone in on certain features and elements that make that building unique. Initially, I was not going to color in these pages and maybe just add a few gray shadows in the back, but I decided to use color and to choose a palette that was reminiscent of the colors that I saw as I walked around versus what was actually there. In the future, I definitely plan on bringing a sketchbook while I travel so that I could draw this while I'm actually there versus a year later, like I'm doing now. Now on to my February calendar spread. I decided to circle back to Friends and replicate the Central Brook logo with my February title block. I wanted to keep this page pretty minimal and use some of the colors in the logo to add some color to the rest of the calendar layout. Now onto the habit tracker. I used a font similar to that of the Friends logo. So here you'll start to see me draw the gold picture frame on the back of Monica's purple door where the peephole is, And so my plan is to fill in each appropriate square in purple so that by the end of the month, hopefully the whole page will be purple, but realistically probably not. And so it'll be a very good visual way to track my habits. So next we have my weekly spreads, which was basically an excuse for me to do a bunch of doodles of buildings that I like. The first major building is the Chrysler Building, which is probably my favorite building in New York City because of its beautiful geometric facade. For the weekly spreads, I decided to do these cutout flaps for each week so that the title block could remain consistent. I used a sharp X-Acto knife and my cutting mat to make sure I didn't cut through the wrong pages. On this week's spread, I drew the Flatiron, which is another iconic building in New York City. One of the main reasons my friends and I went to New York last year was to see our friend perform in Beyond Babel, which, by the way, I highly recommend going to see once they start up again after COVID. The theater in which they performed in was located across from Washington Park, so we were able to hang out under this big arch before the show. The last major building I drew was the Empire State Building. One of the nights we were in New York, we went to 235th Outdoor Rooftop Bar, where we could see the Empire State Building and the view of Manhattan during the sunset. It was freezing cold, but very worth it. I created these tabs in the top corners where I could indicate which week it was. I chose to color the weekly spreads in a color palette that would tie them all together, and again, I wanted it to feel more like a watercolor drawing, so a little bit more of a sketchbook feel. There were so many other buildings that I wanted to draw, but I just couldn't fit them all. And just like last time, my phone decided to stop recording on me and I did not notice, so sorry about that, but I guess we shall skip to the final flip through. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you for my March Plan With Me video next month.